Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much for coming on today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're in series 1 of Minority Mental Health, and we are sponsored by the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights, as well as Harbor Heritage University. And we're bringing you Minority Mental Health. We have a 4-part series that we're going to be doing this week that is going to be speaking about mental health, but in the underserved communities. Now, minority, as we see in the United States, always deals with those communities of color, but we're going to be talking about those that are inaccessible. So those minority communities in this series, we're going to speak about the Indo-Paki community. We're going to be speaking about the indigenous communities. Now, today, we're going to kick it off with the African communities. And we're going to be speaking about the Latinx communities also. So these are communities that are also of color, but are estranged, if you will, from the access and the inclusion of proper and accessible mental health. So our series is going to open up as a blessing because we're going to service domestic violence concerns in July. When I was asked, Queen Mother asked me, well, why are you doing DV in July when October is the month? I said, because most women, as we know, won't make it to October because they will be either maimed or killed or injured or affected in some way with domestic violence that will not allow them to either see October or know October exists because of their mental status. So we are trying to get this conversation going. We have great visionaries on board today. We have 2 panelists that are respected in their fields individually, but together they are a dynamo in mental health and mental health awareness. They are women that I respect and trust deeply, and they are also professionals in their own right to understand what it is that we are doing. So first and foremost, I'd like to welcome NYU, Fordham, and Columbia this morning. We got all 3 colleges in today, universities, excuse me, that are in today. And we have about a handful of students on each that just want to hear about the series, those that are in social work, case management, those are in psychiatry and psychology, respectively, that are listening in. So these are students that are going to be going into the respective fields and want to hear what the professionals are doing today. So while we're waiting, I'd ask those professionals to put your name, your email, and your websites in the chat so that they would be able to get in touch with you. They would also be able to reach out to you, maybe on LinkedIn, and be able to get more information, as well as how to break in. They're looking for internships as well. So they're summer students. So clearly, if they're in school, they're looking to get their feet wet in the field. So I want to ask each of you to be able to give them your information, give them the credence of getting to know you and getting into the field under the tutelage of your mentorship. So thank you so very much. Because I don't have the PowerPoint to lead me, I'm going to go off ear and of course, doing things right and in order. I'm going to have Bishop Lomax, if you can you open us up in prayer?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. So, Father, we thank you for everyone who gathered here. Thank you for this event. Father, we ask that you allow everything to be said and done in order. Father, we also ask that this event brings healing, brings understanding, Father, but most of all, God, we ask that it inspires someone, it encourages someone, it empowers someone, and most of all, it educates someone. And so, Father, we just thank you for today and for every household that's been represented and for all of our students, Father. We ask you to be with them as well. And Father, and we give you all praise, honor, and glory in in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Ameen, ameen, Allahu ameen. We are going to speak to the goodness and the benevolence of what it is that mental health is. And in minority mental health, which is the advantageousness and awareness for July, we are going to be going into mental health as it relates to accessibility, vulnerability, and inclusion. The accessibility, of course, are there mental health avenues that people can go to? I mean, we speak about getting them there, but do we actually have accessible mental health programs in these communities? Do we have people that are willing to open up a Saturday clinic and do some referral work? Are there practitioners that are willing to go out to the community and open up a weekend clinic, a weekday clinic in the evenings so they have somewhere to go after work, after a stressful work day or work week? What about those in houses of worship? Do we have benevolent practitioners that are able to go into houses of worship and offer these services, maybe free of charge, or maybe 1 or 2 a week, or by appointment only, or wherever the access is? Do we have these availabilities? Then the inclusion. Are people excluded due to price? You know, you may have a Saturday clinic, but then if you charge $150 a session, then we have someone that really needs to be seen or accessed. They may not be able to afford it. Or if they are in the community and they don't speak the language, they may not be accessible to it. So we have to understand what we're putting out there when we put out services, and that they are teachable molds and models that we will be able to repeat in other communities. So when we speak about this, we have to speak about those that are actually doing the work. So today we brought 2 people on that are very, very valuable in their own right. I'm going to introduce them individually, but we are going to introduce them as it relates to what we are giving. And I think sometimes we have to speak to those that are giving the services and to see what it is that they are giving. So we're going to speak to Vanessa Adebayo, who is someone that is miraculous in her own right. I have not seen her not speak about mental health in all of her circles. I mean, she's glorious and glamorous on the screen, and she's everywhere you could possibly be in the globe. But I think that when we see her speaking about mental health, and we speaking about what it is that we are getting as far as mental health access. To understand, she is reigning in Washington, D.C. now. She is a great advocate for those that are dealing with mental health disparities, but her international development as a professional with specialties in monitoring and evaluation, fundraising, operational research, technical implementation, capacity building, big one, networking, and technical implementation of programs and programs and activities. I couldn't get it out. Please forgive me. She brings 6 years of experience with proven success in leadership and exhibiting a discipline in analytic approaches to identifying and resolving problems. I can't say anything more than thank you so very much for coming. And thank you for being here, Madam Adebayo. I do know that you have a topic you're going to be speaking about, so I'm just going to allow the day to flow in the energy of goodness and just allow you to speak on your topic. It has been very versed around the world, and you speak so eloquently on it. So I was asking if you could just give us a few parameters and speak about what it is that the African voice in mental health means. What does it mean for language, culture, and tradition in mental health of the African voice? Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Amina. Thank you, Dr. Lomax. Thank you, Ms. Carmen Burks. I really appreciate, just the opportunity to be on this platform. And shout out to all the NYU students as well, because that's my alma mater. I graduated from their MPH program, and to be fair, NYU also is a large part of my story as to how I entered into international development work, as well as even focusing on mental health. So actually, me and Dr. Amina haven't spoken in a while, but I actually currently reside in Lagos, Nigeria.
We're back.
Here,
nice.
Yeah, so I live here now. I've been living here for about 3 years. But I work for an organization. I'm working for an organization actually based in New York, and we fund grassroots community projects. So during the day, that's kind of what I focus on. But when I'm off hours and I'm not doing grant funding for grassroots community projects, I'm focusing on mental health, as Dr. Amina alluded to. And like I said, NYU had such a large role to play in that journey. Being a student and pursuing my master's in global public health, I kind of understood that I really wanted to focus my master's thesis on something that was going to bring answers to questions that maybe that I needed. I wanted to also solve some type of health equity issues, because I understood that for me, working in certain areas and in certain places and settings, I realized that not everyone had quality access to healthcare, and I wanted to understand what those gaps were. And so through a behavioral psych class that I took while I was studying in Ghana through NYU, I then identified mental health being a very big problem, especially around the stigma associated, the lack of mental health resources allocated, even on a government level, people just not understanding and not having the proper knowledge they needed to address their mental health. And then also the mental health care providers also not having the right resources, not getting paid enough. The caretakers at home, the family members, not really understand what was happening. Also, them having to deal with their own mental health because they were pouring so much into their own family members, and questions needed to be answered. And so I actually ended up focusing my master's thesis on the effectiveness of social marketing campaigns to improve attitudes and behaviors towards mental health. And then through that, I decided to actually implement Africa's Mental Health Matters, which is an initiative that has been going on for about 6 years now. And so, I mean, when people see me, they're like, oh, you're the mental health, you're always talking about mental health. And it's great. However, mental health has thankfully transformed since I started the work that we started in 2018. And now we're in 2023. And I know people sometimes reflect during the pandemic or 2020, and they say, you know, it came with good and it came with bad. But I think for me as a mental health advocate, it really was an opportunity for us to progress in our awareness and our knowledge around mental health, because as we all know, we were all at a standstill, and people really had the opportunity to think about how their mental health affects them and impacts them as individuals, as a community, as a family unit. And so being in Africa, I mean, you've seen now it's a conversation, right? I mean, we just got an opportunity to partner with an international organization called Great Places to Work. And, you know, they're based in Africa, but, you know, a lot of the countries that they're working in are starting to now understand that mental health is even a part of our working environment, right? If you don't have good mental health, you can't be a productive employee. You can't show up and do your 100% of the best work that you need to. And so organizations and businesses and corporations all around the world, but specifically in Africa, are starting to understand the impact of mental health on the individual. And so I would want to just focus on the fact that knowledge is power. And so if you don't know, you can't actually walk in authority of taking control of your life. You can't walk in authority of being able to make informed decisions. And so traditionally, the African voice has told us that we should endure. The African voice has told us that we should just, you know, take life as it comes and get through it. The African voice has told us to tolerate. The African voice has told us to, you know, push through and kind of just continue going without really addressing our issues, our experiences, and our trauma. And the fact of the matter is that life is happening to all of us. When I think about mental health, I think it embodies who we are as individuals. It embodies our experiences, the way we grew up, our background, our day-to-day interactions with people, the way that we present, the way that we show up, the way that we, you know, the way that we are, right? And it's like, if we're not addressing what's happening up here, then we can never really fully show up as healthy individuals. I think over time, you know, traditionally, even as we're talking about domestic violence, it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to show up. It's hard to be upfront about our issues and our experiences, because a lot of us, unfortunately, are taught to kind of keep things under carpet and not really address things. We're told that if we express some of the things that are behind our closet, or the things that we don't want to discuss with people, well, if we do bring it to people's attention, we'll potentially walk in shame, we'll potentially be judged. There will potentially be a lot of stigma associated to our real problems and issues. And so that the fact of the matter is that as individuals in Africa and the diaspora, everywhere globally, we all have really hard circumstances that we have to deal with. Life happens to us, and back to this whole knowledge is power. If we don't know how to go about addressing these problems or these issues, we will be stagnant. We will be in standstill. Essentially, we'll have to go through life not addressing these issues, and they show up in the way that we operate, in the way that we interact with people, in the way that we process things. And so, I mean, for me as a mental health advocate, I really promote mental health because I know that ultimately it helps us to show up as our best selves. It helps us to be able to get the healing and the help that we need to be able to move forward and progress and to be better mothers, to be better brothers, sisters, fathers, in every retrospect, in every role that we play, whether you're an employer, your son, your daughter, whoever you are, you're able to show up as a better version of yourself when you address what you've been through. I think there's been a lot of progress made. We have therapists now that are really stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, you know, irregardless of your geographical location, irregardless of your access to finance, irregardless of your socioeconomic status, we're here, either by providing pro bono services, by providing some type of virtual service online where you don't have to actually show up in person, or even just developing an app, right, where you don't even have to really interact with someone, but you have some type of AI system in place to kind of talk you through your feelings or your thoughts or whatever you may be experiencing. We also have a lot of helplines that have developed over the years. A lot of people are putting together instant solutions to your problems. If you are contemplating committing suicide, if you are contemplating harming yourself, if you are going through a tragic situation where someone is physically or verbally abusing you, there are lines now available where you can call people and instantly speak to people on the phone. There are a lot of organizations that have also kind of rose to the occasion. I mean, back then in 2018, I did my research and there wasn't the visibility around mental health organizations, especially on the continent, wasn't as prevalent. But over the years, people have started nonprofit organizations. I mean, we even see like in the States, right? We have people who have great influence, celebrities. You know, we have Taraji P. Henson. She started her foundation. She started access to mental health resources for minorities. People are speaking up and advocating for better mental health and better and advocating for better use of these resources that are available. I think ultimately people have to seek for information, and that's why I say knowledge is power, because ultimately, I mean, if you're not going out of your way, or you're not intentional, I should say, about prioritizing your mental health, it's just very hard to have that information fall in your lap, right? If you're not attending a forum like this, or stumbling upon an Instagram live or someone's page or a website, or having a conversation with a friend, this type of information may not come or be readily available. But I do think that the visibility, the awareness, I should say, around mental health is really helping people understand that they do have to actively be intentional about seeking these resources because they do exist. Ultimately, I think, you know, traditionally, especially, I wanted to talk about domestic violence and related to mental health, but I mean, you know, in Africa, the ways that, you know, the way the woman is kind of brought up, it's formally, even from grade school up, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of, I would say it's discouraged women to really speak up, right? Or discourage women to really advocate for themselves, right? Because traditionally you kind of take a servitude attitude, that makes sense. You know, you're there as a woman to be polite, go to school, do what you're told, you know, listen to your parents, graduate, get married. And then, you know, whoever you get married to has become now the head of the household. And unfortunately, a lot of women end up getting into marriages quite early and quite young without really fully developing into themselves, without fully really understanding who they've been called to be. And I don't want to get too spiritual, but it's like, if you don't know your purpose and if you don't know your destiny, then it's very hard for you to get into a relationship with someone fully equipped with the understanding of the direction you're supposed to go in life. And so it's very easy then for people to kind of manipulate that and change your trajectory and try to change what God has already instilled in you. And so essentially what you find is a lot of young women in bondage, right? They're not financially in a space where they can make decisions for themselves. They're not emotionally equipped. They're not, you know, in just a position altogether to really make sound decisions. And unfortunately, if you marry someone who's abusive, if you marry someone that doesn't prioritize your well-being or doesn't prioritize your mental health, it can seldom end up leading to self-destruction, right? It can lead to you potentially putting your kids at harm, your family at harm, yourself at harm, and worse scenarios, which hasn't been, has been common. We've seen this in the newspaper. We've seen this on social media. We've seen this in the news, where young women are dying, right? And not dying because they were sick, not dying because they had a diagnosis, but dying because they were being abused, and they were, they were too scared or not informed enough to be able to get out of the situations. And so ideally, I think it's our job as mental health advocates to understand, to also put out there that there are resources available to women who are dealing with this, who may be experiencing this. And it's our job to also help people feel empowered to know that, they don't have to stay in their situation, and that there are people and communities available, whether it's through your church, whether it's through nonprofits, whether it's through clinicians, whether it's through therapists, whether it's through support groups. There's so many people that are rooting for them and waiting for them to be able to make healthier decisions. Overall, I wanted to leave with just an acronym that I think helps all of us to just prioritize our mental health. I think ALG says it best, and stands for assess. We all should be assessing, and that just comes back to the intentionality where we are, right? I do this all the time. I think it's easy as individuals to pour into people and to be there for other people, but seldom are we there for ourselves. And so take out time to assess where you are in life, take out time to assess what you're feeling, take out time to assess whether or not you're in a good space, and try to figure out what is going on, with yourself. Also, L stands for listen. So listen to your body. Some of us, we're working overtime, we're going to and from, running school, doing school runs, going to school, working, fulfilling all types of different roles as individuals, and we're not listening to our bodies. We're tired, we're exhausted, we're stressed, we may even be depressed. It's time to just listen to yourselves, listen to your bodies, pay attention. Especially in this day and age, our health is our wealth. So if we're not healthy, if we're not being able to move effectively, then we can't show up for other people, right? And then G stands for give, right? Give yourself grace, give yourself time, give yourself the opportunity to be able to receive the knowledge, right? Like we said, knowledge is power. So if you don't give yourself the opportunity to understand what's going on, it's hard to move forward. It's hard to progress. It's hard to make healthy decisions. And then E is encourage, right? Encourage yourself to be consistent, encourage yourself to show up, encourage yourself to get the help that you need. And help doesn't necessarily sometimes mean going to a therapist. Sometimes it's praying. Sometimes it's going to a community, being a part of a fellowship, or going to a community group, or joining a gym, or doing whatever you feel makes you a better person to be able to show up for people around you. And yeah, those are just some of the tips. I didn't want to take too much time, but with Africa's Mental Health, we are a nonprofit organization that is based both in Lagos, Nigeria. Not even Lagos, but just Nigeria overall, and Ghana as well, and in the US. And so we are focused on bringing mental health awareness on the African continent, as well as on the diaspora. And really and truly, we've done this in so many different ways, through annual conferences, through community engagements, through partnerships with different organizations and businesses. But more recently, we decided that we kind of want to just hone in on one or two things. And the things that we found that we're successful in, and things that we found that we do well, are being, number one, able to bridge the Africa to the diaspora. And we're doing that now through a program with Georgetown Georgetown University doctoral students, who are actually going to be coming to Ghana in the next few weeks to understand the mental health care delivery system. And we're going to be the ones leading them on that trip. And we're going to be putting together forums and webinars to give them the opportunity to network with other professionals on ground. And so it's an exchange of knowledge, and it's also an opportunity for them to be able to learn, but them also to be able to provide their own expertise and their experiences as well. And so bridging that gap is quite important. And then the second part of what we do that we really want to start to focus on is, like what I mentioned earlier, we're working with businesses and organizations to be able to really understand and prioritize their employees' mental health, because we understand that a lot of people are working hard, and unfortunately, they don't feel like they're working in psychologically safe environments due to the fact that their employers are not creating a space where they can prioritize their mental health. And so for us, it's really important on how we can kind of do this on a day-to-day and continue to do the work that allows us to be able to impact people, but also allows businesses and organizations and students to be able to learn the importance of mental health overall. I think that's about it. I just want to say thank you once again, Dr. Amina, and to everyone else. And I hope that I was of help or resource in the little information I shared.
Absolutely, you were. Absolutely. And actually, I have some comments here from NYU. I'm going to choose them first over the other two, simply because they're your alma mater. One is great point on solving health inequities. I see that there is a great gap that needs to be closed. And as a new clinician, that's going to be one of my priorities. I too am going for MPH, and I am going to set my sights on bridging that gap. So thank you so very much. That was encouraging to her. Michael says caretakers as it relates to the Africans. And that's just how he wrote it as it relates to the Africans. It says that caretakers are often family members that are in denial of mental health issues. So when they are caring for their loved one, they're caring for them in a medical way and not a mental health way. So if they are needing medicine, they're seeing it as an illness and not a situation that requires follow-up. Just keep taking your pills and you will get better type mentality. So that's a great point to speak about as far as the African voice. Next one is follow-up care. There is non-existent follow-up care in the African tradition. If you are diagnosed, you're considered weak, so you will not go back. If you are seen as weak in the community, you will not be respected. So thus you will find ways to cover up or not go to follow-up care that is necessary and needed for you to stay well. And in the advantageousness of what it is that is needed and necessary for you, you will never receive due to pride and ignorance. So that's another comment. Another statement was the children's impact on learning. Oh, wow. It says children's impact on mental health, learning, and availability is not being looked at because they're seeing it as a norm, and this is how people are to react in society. And whether it is a break in psychosis or it is a abnormal break due to mental instabilities, children are seeing this as that's what adults do. So we have to get more programs and programming for them to be able to see the greatness of what is needed for children. What's needed for children, and make that a norm as well. So that's a great point. Those are all great points from NYU based on your comments. They're also talking about access of needs, and they're needing them. When you mentioned the acronym, it says the acronym gave me great pause, as accessing for needs is not a great thing here in Liberia. We are looking at using this as a presidential platform to be able to allow access to be a foreground thought, because there are a lot of people that are not being able to even get to the facilities. And we're looking at mobile units to come to the villages and the community. Great point. Awesome point. NYU, you did great. Fordham and Columbia, I'll get to you after Bishop Lomax. So please hold your questions, and thank you so very much. But I did want to add that, you did mention a big thing that I wanted to key in. You mentioned mental health emergencies, and you mentioned that there was a great shift in that, and that we're not, we have access and we have resources. But here in the United States, the Islamic community is actually looking at mental health emergencies as a public health problem, not a public safety problem. And we're putting that into mindset because there's so many people that are being seen as we're a public safety issue, so the police have to get involved. And once they get involved, it never goes right for anyone that's dealing with mental health issues. So we're trying to take that tangent away from mental health. So we're seeing that we're looking to have the police in their advocacy build on MPHs to come aboard as part of the police team, that if 988 is activated, that they go out first if there aren't any weapons or any accesses to sharp or valuable safety issues. And we're trying to assess it as a public health problem. So that means we're getting public health professionals. Getting an MPH is one of the things that we're promoting in getting as far as the advocacy and the good stewardship program, which is what it's called, in the police force. We're trying to equip them on the fire and the ambulances for the fire department as well when they come out, to make sure that anyone that is at risk in fire or fire safety hazards, they're always referred to the police. So if you have a fire in, let's say, a group home and they have mentally ill children in there, they're always recommended for them to go to the police department instead of having a mental health advocate on board or at the scene to be able to de-escalate and get the issues then. You know, most of them don't know what it's like to have a fire. I mean, we're normal and we don't know what it's like to be in a fire or, you know, panic situation. So someone that's under the guise of mental health or mental health disparity is seen as that. Last but not least, you didn't touch on this, but it brought up a trigger that women, now of course I'm biased to this, but pregnant women and women that are in maternal care pieces, right now, Black women in the mental capacity that are pregnant are entering a hospital like Black men are being pulled over by the police. And we're afraid in these situations. When Black women go into the hospital to have a baby, there's that same fear factor as Black men getting pulled over by police. We don't know if we're going to survive that situation. And that is a mental health tragedy that is happening to us right now, as we speak. And there are women that are going to home births and running the risk of safety in the home births just so they won't have to have the impersonal care that we are seeing in the hospitals as women of color in minority spaces. And then what do you do when you feel as though you've been violated? Because public safety issues are not being held. Public safety issues in the hospital. Having advocates, there's no such thing as a patient advocate for pregnant women in the hospital. I mean, if it was, we wouldn't have these disparities. So what are we doing? So where are those garners? And these are all great points as it backs your story and it backs your point. And that's a great lead into what it is that we feel that the violent domestication feels like. Now, I know Bishop Lomax is going to speak poignantly, and I want everyone to listen with both ears and all of your mind to this. But I think what we're going to hear is there is a violent domestication that has to deal with outside of the physicality. And I think that that's a primal piece that most people don't understand, that domestic violence starts before the first hit happens. And I think that that is a huge, huge piece that most of us don't understand. And you brought in as a tangent in the African community. But here in the African American community, flipping the script a little bit, there's a greater leeway. So I'm going to introduce Bishop Lomax, and thank you so very much, Madam Adebayo, for that great insight. And you did give quite a bit. We have some more comments coming into NYU, so we'll get to them in a minute. But Bishop Lomax is an editor, author, publisher, and literary agent. She has authored and co-authored 5 bestsellers. In addition to being a best-selling author, Bishop Lomax also is the founder and president of Karen Lomax Ministries, or Kairos Literacy Agency. Hers, or HERRS LLC, is a professional life coaching organization, and his HIS Outreach Ministry. In May 2018, she founded and launched her Hers Life Coaching Academy to provide training and mentorship for the professional life coaches. Then in 2019, she founded and launched I'm a Hers Girl Network and helped equip and empower women and girls on a global scale. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to Understanding the Story and Raising the Voice of Bishop Karen Lomax.
Well, thank you, and thank you. I was like, who is she talking about? Who is she talking about? But thank you to Vanessa for that. She took us on a flight that we needed to go on. And now I'm gonna help land the plane with her and help y'all unpack. But as she was stating, can I correct just one thing, Madam? It's 13 bestsellers now. That was an old bio. It's 13.
I am not worthy. I'll get
to later, but no, it's all good. That was just an old bio. I didn't give her my updated bio. But for everyone who's on, some of the Hers girls are actually on today. So I want to thank them, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. And we do have someone from the HIS team as well who is joining us. So I'm grateful for that. But as you were stating, and I saw Madam Vanessa put a comment in the comment section when it talks about that postpartum piece when you're going into the hospital. And that's another reason why women, when they go into the hospital, African-American women, is if they are experiencing this type of postpartum thing, automatically in their minds, it's like, they're going to take my baby. They're going to have me locked up and they're going to take my baby. So a lot of them don't come forward when they're experiencing those postpartum depression symptoms. They won't come forward because that has always been the case. Is if you're experiencing any type of, mental anything, we're going to take the baby first. We're not going to help you first. We're going to take the baby first. And so that leads into that piece. But I also want to come at this particular topic from the ministry side as well. Because when you start to step off into the mental health piece, especially in the minority communities, it doesn't matter if you're African American, it doesn't matter if you're Indian American, it doesn't matter if you're Mexican American, that minority piece, when you start to step off into the divine and you start talking about mental health, oh my goodness. Okay. So we're going to get there too. I'm going to be very brief but succinct. We'll get there as well. But the piece where I'm going to come in at is, like you said, before the first hit even happens with the domestic violence piece of this mental health, I need people to understand, and this is what we really need to advocate for as well, is abuse is abuse. All right. And I always want to let people know that domestic violence is a mental health issue. There has to be something wrong with you mentally for you to want to put your hands on someone and cause someone else harm. And that's where we have this disparage at. Instead of people getting mental health care, it's, well, we're just going to put them in jail. It's like, all right, you're putting them in jail, and then when they get out of the jail, then you just let them back loose, and then they're doing the same thing to another person, male or female. And so the mental health piece is not being taken care of. And so we have to start there. Now, when it comes to the domestic violence part of mental health, I want people to understand that domestic violence is not always someone hitting you. It's not always someone putting their hands on you. You can have domestic violence. In my particular situation, you could have domestic violence where you are being financially abused. And we have a lot of women who are being abused financially because they can be married or with someone and not have access to their finances. It could be finances that they're contributing to. So domestic violence is also financial abuse. It can be also emotional abuse, where someone is constantly doing things to push your emotional buttons just for just for them to have something to do. They don't have anything else better to do. So it's also emotional. So domestic violence can also be someone emotionally abusing you. All right. Someone psychologically abusing you. And I was psychologically, and I was financially, and I was emotionally abused in this. So I am a huge advocate when it comes to the domestic violence piece of the minority mental health. Because again, in our communities, you don't speak out. In our communities, you are raised that, okay, as long as the man is the breadwinner and he's doing whatever he's doing, you just need to be quiet, shut up, and thank God that you got a roof over your head and you got food on your table. That's the way we were raised. And let's just be honest, in the African American community, we were raised that way. It's like he's bringing in the money, and so you just keep the house clean, you keep the kids together, and you take whatever he wants to dish out. Or what are you gonna do? And so many women stayed in these types of relationships because, number one, women weren't getting jobs. The jobs weren't open for them. Women weren't huge on education. Can I just say, we are ahead in education now, women, but women weren't allowed to get an education, okay? And all of that came and stemmed from the male ego. Sorry, men folk, but this is just the truth, and not statistics. And that's one of the things I wanted to speak out on is I don't want us to feel like we are a statistic. Statistics are out there, but we don't want to treat people like they are a statistic. We want to treat people as if they are people, not a number. And so when Vanessa was talking, in my ear, all I heard was, she's advocating, I'm advocating, we have other people advocating, we're talking and we're doing. The problem is we don't have enough doers. We got a lot of people talking. There's a lot of statistics. There's a lot of data, but we don't have enough people doing anything with the statistics and the data. And so when you see unicorns like us, we get the side eye because it's like, how dare you, because you're African American, spill our African American business all over the continent. You know what I mean? And so, like she said, we were told to just be quiet. We were told to just take it. We were told what happens in-house stays in-house. And like one of the students commented, if you do speak out, man or woman, and when it comes to mental health, you're weak. All right. So let's hit at this from the ministry side piece so we can see how this all connects. Now, everybody knows that I'm in ministry, been in ministry a long time. I have to say this, and people are not going to agree, but that's fine. For you to be a leader in any house of worship and not advocate for people to get mental health is a mental health issue in and of itself. I'm just going to put it right there. It's a mental health issue in and of itself. You have people coming to you that need help, and you know that this is a mental issue. You know that they're experiencing, and what they're telling you is a mental health issue, and you can't tackle it from the ministry side. You can't tackle it with, well, we're going to read this scripture and then we're going to pray, but you still going to stay in the situation that you're in. I don't believe in the pray and stay. I don't believe in that. The pray and stay almost had me committing homicide, not suicide, because I love me, but homicide. Okay. It almost had me committing homicide because it was a pray and stay. There were no resources for someone who was going through what I was going through in my marriage at that time. And all I got was the marriage piece. You just need to pray. You need just to, ask God to give you strength and ask God to just show you what you need to do, and you and you and you. And it got to the point where I said, okay, there's no resources for me. So I got to create my own resources for myself. I got to create resources for other people who are in these types of positions who are in the ministry, because those who are don't get to see the back end of the ministry like I see it. There's a lot of mental health that goes on, and they won't speak out because we have put people so high up that, we literally set them next to God. Okay. We really, really have. We've set them next to God. And for even them to come forward to get the mental health that they need, now it looks as if, well, you don't have faith in God. You're not anointed. You know what I mean? You're not as anointed as you say, because if you had faith in God, then you would be able to pray and boom and all this. And I'm like, well, what do y'all think is going to happen? We all have, we have to remember that we're not one-dimensional creatures. We're not one-dimensional. We're not just spiritual beings. We're also natural. And from my faith, he struggled mentally with what he was going to have to do. And so because he struggled mentally, we got to take this. We're going to struggle mentally. All right. And there's no shame in it. There should not be. We have to remove this stigma in the African-American communities everywhere, and minority communities everywhere. We got to remove this stigma that is weak, that for you to go and reach out to get mental health. We got to remove that. We have way too many people dying because of this so-called weakness. It is not weak, it's wise. People don't understand. It takes strength and it takes courage to step outside of what you're in to go get help. I had to experience that in my own situation. I had people looking at me kooky. Y'all know my word, kooky, crazy, because here I am. I'm a pastor. I'm in a marriage and I'm getting ready to get a divorce because of the mental piece that's going on inside of all of this, where you have the financial abuse, the emotional abuse, and then I have children. I got children looking at me. And so we have to get away from that. We have to do more, not talk more. These conversations are great. These conversations are wonderful, but we can't just let it stay here. We can't let this just be another Zoom. Okay, we got to take what we're hearing and then we got to do something with the information that we are hearing. We got to begin to advocate more for ourselves. We have to begin to realize that we have value. And I think that was the issue. And if we were to be honest, so many of us are still dealing with and are still struggling with the mental trauma from our ancestors. Some things we won't even do because we're like, well, and no offense to anyone of another nationality on here, but it's always them against us. You know what I mean? And to me, that starts to sound like bipolar, schizophrenia. You can't even be who and be proud of who you are because of this trauma that we have never dealt with from our ancestors, from when our people were enslaved. We never dealt with that trauma, and that trauma just went down through the generations, and we have so many young men and women dying in the streets for a cause that needs to be taken care of mental health wise. And we don't want to take care of the trauma. And that's where we are right now in our minority communities. We're in a trauma crisis is what we are in, but we don't want to attack the trauma. We would rather look around and say it's this and it's that and it's them and it's this. And it's like, no, we got to take care of us. If we're going to be a this and us, they're going to get mental help. They don't see anything wrong with getting mental help. We are the ones that put a stigma on it, that if you even want to just talk to a psychiatrist, like, well, you must be crazy. I just want to talk to someone so I can unpack what's going on with me mentally. I can't talk to you because if I talk to you, then you're going to call me crazy. If I talk to you, then you're going to be like, well, you just need to pray some more. No, I don't need to pray some more. I need to unload this burden that is on my mind. And so we have to open up these safe spaces. We got to create and open up safe spaces for those who are in ministry. Okay, we got to open that up. And I honestly believe within myself, and I teach this and I preach this, if we see more leaders come forward and get the mental health that they need, their followers would do the same. Okay, the followers would do the same. The sheep would do what the shepherd does. And that's the issue. We don't have a lot of leaders that want to come forward and get help with mental issues. And they have them. Look at some of their wives, and I'm not just putting this off on men, okay? But look at their wives. Some of their wives come to church and they got extra concealer on. Oh, you just got popped in the car. You know what I mean? So it's that type of stuff because there's pressure. Let's just be real. There's pressure on ministry leaders, men and women, and they don't have the safe spaces to talk to someone about what they're going through. They don't have those safe spaces. There's no one that they think that they can trust and will keep that confidence. And that's what we got to have. For those who know, I'm also an Army chaplain. So, I have confidentiality like a priest. So whatever people tell me, it stays with me. And so we don't have that type of system set up in our communities. We don't have that because we always, as Dr. Amina says, we always have that law side. We always have the legal side to it where they can't come to us and just say, hey, this is what I'm going through, this is how I'm feeling, because the first thing you know, somebody's pushing a button, calling the police, and they're coming to pick you up. Now you are 5150. And that's what you're known as, okay? And so we got to open up these safe spaces and places for ministry leaders and for leaders in general. All right, just leaders in general, we got to open this up. We can't just keep talking about it, and we can't just keep going around in circle where you have a handful of us that says, listen, I got this organization, I have this service, but nobody wants to implement your services because, number one, let's just be real. Number one, it wasn't their idea. And they can't control the you know what I mean? They can't control the service that you want to provide. And if they can't control it and say how, you know, it's going to be done, then they don't want to implement it. But at the same time, they're not trained to handle what you're trained and certified to handle. And so that's the other issue. Most ministry leaders are not trained in mental health. They're not trained in that. They're trained to preach, to teach, you know, and do counseling of some sort, but they're not trained in mental health. And I think we need to get back when we are going to when we start to ordain and put people in these positions. I believe there should be some formal training. People may not agree with me, but I have 3 master's degrees that say otherwise, that people need to get formal training, all right, to sit in these positions. There needs to be some sort of formal training, because we do have so many people who are in ministry who die because of mental health problems. You see it all the time in the news, on social media, where some pastor has you know, killed his family and then killed himself. We see this all the time, and we just look at it and we're like, well, we're just gonna pray for the family. No, we need to do more than just pray for the family. We need to figure out what was going on and how we can prevent this. That's the thing. We need to figure out what is going on that could cause someone so much stress, so much depression, and to the point where they're like, well, I'm not just going to kill me, I'm going to kill them, and I'm going to kill me, the whole family. There's an issue here. There's a disconnect somewhere, and we need to find out where that disconnect is, and then we need to implement these services inside our houses of worship, all right, and create safe spaces for people. And listen, leaders, if you're listening, don't be afraid to refer somebody. It doesn't mean that you are not anointed. It doesn't mean you are not appointed to sit where you sit. It means that you're wise enough to know this falls outside of your area of expertise, and you're potentially saving the life of that person and other people. Don't be afraid to refer them to someone who is specialized in this. I had to go outside of the church as a pastor. I had to go outside of the church to get help and to find someone who specialized in divorce trauma. And y'all will have to get the book and read my story, but it wasn't just a divorce. It was trauma. It was crazy. This thing lasted 3 whole years. And I had to step outside of the ministry to get help because they had nothing for me inside of the ministry, but yet they didn't want me talking to anybody about what I was going through. Again, in and of itself, that's a mental health issue, that you don't want me to get help, but you can't get me the help. So I had to step outside of the ministry and get help, psychological help, and then create resources now for other women and men to get help as well. And so you mentioned my acronym. 2 of them, hers and his. Those are my 2 organizations. Hers with 2 R's, and that's healing. We already know what that is. You need to have that before you can tackle anything. You got to be healed. You got to get some healing for your mental healing, emotional healing, financial healing, all the way across the board. You got to be healed. And the E stands for empowerment. Okay, we have to learn how to empower one another and learn how to empower ourselves. All right, and getting the help you need, that's empowering. All right, and you doing it first, taking that step, somebody else in that same position is going to see it and be like, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. All right. The first R is restoring. That comes back to restoring your peace of mind. That comes back to restoring all the pieces that were scattered because of your mental health issues. Then the next R is reorganization. Now you can continue to operate the way that you were before all of this happened. Now you got to reorganize your life that's going to be supportive of your new life, of the mental health that you're getting. And then the last one is the S, which means support. And that's what we're talking about. Knowing how to get support, surrounding yourself with people who will support you. And then the HIS acronym for the men's outreach that I have is also healing. And then for the men, it's inspiring. The women need to empower, the men need to be inspired so they can help to empower the women. Take care of the I, and then the S as well is men also need that support. So the healing and the supporting are the big common factors in what we need to do. There needs to be some mental health healing that needs to take place. We got to advocate for this. There has to be that. And then the support. Let's support our minorities and stop saying it's weak. And stop saying, it's shameful. We want to remove this stigma out of our communities, that it's not weak and it's not shameful that you're experiencing something that is abnormal. You're experiencing a mental health that you should want someone to go get help, that when they're experiencing something abnormal like that. And so with that, I'm going to end it because there's so much more. I have like programs and everything on this, but I'm going to end it there. But my biggest takeaway, what I want people really to take away from this is healing, supporting, and support those who say, listen, I think I need to talk to somebody. Don't easily talk about, well, let's pray and let's find it. No, let's seek, know the services that are available in your area. And if there aren't any available in your area, then look into how you can become a resource in your area. Go and see what you have to do to get certified to be that mental health advocate in your community. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bishop Lomax. I thank you so much for that. I have quite a few people. Columbia is really sounding off for this one because this is the social work program that's coming through. Isabel says there is mentalhealthpulpit.com. And mentalhealthpulpit.com is supporting, she says, mental health from a faith-based approach. Of course, it's the Christian approach. And it's supporting mental health advocacy for those in leadership. So she did bring that on, which she knows that if you come on, you got to bring solutions to the problem. So that's a huge thing. Of course, 988 is the best thing right now because that's a direct line to mental health. But there was a statistic Sean put in here. It says 20% of church attendees are in some way struggling with their mental health. We don't address it appropriately, and then we run the risk of ultimately hurting the other 20% of those church attendees that alienate us because they don't know. That was a great point. But that's now 40% of your congregation that's either hurting or alienating. And there is no love in that compassion. So that is a huge, huge piece that he put out there. There is Michelle that says, our churches and our communities need to be a safe space for everyone. Unless we tell people around us that Christianity does not promote peace, then we need to be that peace in action through our actions and without the assumptions that having mental health or mental health stigma results in you suffering and being of suffrage in society. That's a big piece, that suffrage piece. We desperately need to hear the message of hope that having a diagnosis doesn't exempt us from the love of God and a life filled with purpose. That is huge, huge, huge. Thank you so much. I'm just going to read those in the interest of time. Bishop Lomax and Madam Adebayo, if you can, I'm going to bring in a few points on this and you guys can chime in as our closing points here. Bishop Lomax first is chaplains. These are my notes. Chaplains have an oath of confidentiality. Do you think that was a sign back then when they made the oath a way to hide these things from people, especially in the church, that it was made that if someone was to tell you, it's so that they can get resources, but it was meant to hide the ailment, and that's why it had to be held in such high reverence?
I don't think it was meant to hide. I think it was meant to protect the person who comes forward to get the help. And because of the mental health stigma that's out there, and I can speak on this from the military side, from the stigma that's out there, I'm a safe space. So they can tell me anything, it doesn't go anywhere, and I can get them help without everybody in the entire battalion knowing. Now, if it gets to the point to where, it's something really, really, really detrimental, I have a way that I can backhand go and allow my battalion commander to know that, hey, I got a soldier, that this soldier is here, but he don't get to get all up inside of, their business. And so that way, but it was meant to go that way, because back then, we're talking about this and you were a risk, and they didn't want you to be to have a mental health problem because it posed a risk for everyone else. Now, on the flip side, it can not for the chaplains, but for them getting in, period. That is something that they really don't do when you're enlisting and you've been enlisted before. It's like they do all of the tests and everything else that you do, but I haven't seen the psychological rundown before they enter into the military. I haven't seen that piece. I think you can catch that piece that helps, but no, it wasn't meant to hide. It was meant to protect. It was meant to protect that person, because again, this wasn't wide open topic at that point.
Sure, and I agree. Being in the military, I remember we had to take a psychosocial before we went in, and we swore in, and they had to make sure we had no mental health in the background. And I remember them saying that, and I'm thinking, like, at the time I'm 17, like, what kind of mental health could I possibly have? Being ignorant. Not knowing that there are people dealing with mental health. I was like, I'm 17. No, I haven't done anything in life to be crazy yet, and that was kind of how I felt, that mental health was because you were involved in that. So, Madam Adebayo, this one is for you. Right. Because of the shame of mental health, why do you think that it's socially acceptable to accept someone that is going through substance abuse and get treatment for that, and that's socially acceptable, yet some of the substance abuse is because of mental health disorders? They're self-medicating, they're self-treating. Why do you think it's easier for someone to go into a rehab for substance abuse than it is for them to go into therapy, and how it promotes in society?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think ultimately, because when you're going through a substance abuse, 9 out of 10 times you can see the ramifications of that physically, right? And whatever that may look like, it may be you constantly, feeling jittery or anxious. It can be sluggish behavior. It can be oversleeping. It can mean you losing the desire to go about your day-to-day activity. It can mean so many different things, but when you know that there's a substance involved, it's a lot easier for people to feel like they can intervene and they can go about getting the right help and resources. Versus with mental health challenges, it's very hard sometimes to identify when someone is going through something. You can be depressed and show up every day, smile, present like you're perfectly normal, and literally be going through so much more inside. And so you have to be very careful when diagnosing people. Now, a lot of times substance abuse, like you said, is comes about because it originally was a mental health challenge that wasn't actually addressed or treated, and then it kind of spirals into drug abuse. And so I think intervention, early intervention, I should say, is so important, that we understand when we're spiraling out of control before we get to the next thing. And similar to even suicide, right? Like when we think about suicide, people think about, oh, well, that person had, must have been like, did they know that they had all of these other options? Didn't they know that there was a calling center, or didn't they know that there was a family member that kept on reaching out? But what people don't understand is that also is a response to a mental health illness. And so a lot of times these are things that are just going untreated without people really seeing the physical ramifications of it. So yeah, I think it's something that we just all have to kind of do better to identify. But I also think when you see there's a substance or something else that's used externally outside of what you may be going through internally, it's a lot easier to address it, because it's like, oh, if we remove the cocaine, or we remove the weed, or we remove the alcohol, then this person will be better, rather than really understanding what's going on within a person.
Yeah, thank you. That was deep, because that's one of the things that we're dealing with now. So many of the kids are seeing in their families and in their communities, people being assessed for substance abuse and referrals into substance abuse counseling, but they don't realize there's a dual and maybe even a tri-diagnosis that's going on there that is rooted in mental health, and we don't speak about that as openly. It's almost like it's okay to be on meth than it is for you to have mental health disparities. It's acceptable. It's easier to accept that you're on meth than you have a bipolar disorder, and that kind of skews me a little bit, in society, how warped we see on our measures, unless we tell people around us that they're in a safe space or a safe place, they'll never know. But if we're constantly saying, oh, well, she was on meth for a while, or she was doing this for a while, and then solving that problem, we'll still never toppling on the mental health issue that caused her to use in the first place, the self-medicating piece, the self-deprecating piece, that she doesn't feel worthy and she wants to escape, or they are not wanting to be here. So this is a huge piece. All right, last bit from Fordham University. I have a few here statements. It says, not all problems can be solved, but every problem can be served. This is a quote from Pastor Rick Warren. And Michael says, the assumption will be made that nothing has changed toward the stigma that surrounds the topic of mental health, resulting in silent suffering of a community that desperately needs to hear the message. Not having a diagnosis doesn't mean that there isn't a problem. It just means that that is not the resource for you. So that is another issue, finding the right resources for what it is that you need, the misdiagnosis, the undiagnosis, and those that are being diagnosed at home. Some of us that want to go to our elders to seek the wisdom are actually seeking the diagnosis, because if an elder says, I think it is, that's normally what you go with, especially if it's an elder close to you who you believe is in your best interest. So we don't want to say that, like Madam Adebayo says, we don't want to diagnose and be self-diagnosing, because that leads to calamities that we may not want to get involved in. Next, we have Brendan that says, we live in a fallen and broken world, and our brains are an organ. And just like a kidney or a liver, we have to understand that sometimes it just doesn't function the right way. But if we have a hepatitis, do we just throw away the liver with the diagnosis? Or do we change the condition of the liver through therapy and through medication? So should we not insult the brain in the same way? We should manage to take care of the brain and do mental health exercises and mental health hygiene routines that should infer and discipline our mind. If that doesn't work, then we should seek out higher measures of stability. So these are great comments and great points. And again, all of these are comments from students that are either in social work, psychiatry, or psychology that is coming into the vesting of doing this work. So I want to thank you all. And in the interest of time, I want to ask if Bishop Lomax and then Madam Adebayo, if you could leave us with a few gems so we can close out today. And I want to thank each of the educational centers that came aboard today. So Dr. Bishop Lomax, please.
Yes, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak on the panel. I think one of the biggest and most top gems is if you know you are suffering, go get help.
Yeah.
Let's just start there. Go get help. And I know it's hard about, the stigma that is out there. But I would rather deal with people looking at me as weak or whatever and still live to be here tomorrow. So go get help. That's number one. Number two, get involved. Get involved with this topic. Get involved. You've seen what is out there. You know what is and is not available in your communities. Get involved. And again, if you don't have anything and you don't know of any of the services, then see how you can, probably be the first one to provide that service. So that's number two. And then number three, mental health is real. I want people to understand that mental health is a real thing. And as much as I would love it to happen, we cannot pray it away. You can't pray it away. So that was my top three.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Adebayo.
I just want to leave everyone with, once again, prioritize your mental health. You can only show up for people as where you meet yourself, right? So if we're not intentional about taking care of ourselves, we're not intentional about practicing self-care and making sure that we're seeking the right resources to prioritize our mental health, we can't show up for other people. You cannot pour out of an empty cup. I also want to leave that we need to be intentional about seeking resources, the right resources, whenever we're in need. It does not mean you're crazy, doesn't mean you're mad, it doesn't mean that you're weak. Yes, God and prayer exist, but God and prayer exist simultaneously with also resources to help us. And that's why God created those resources so that we could utilize them and utilize them effectively. Also rely on community, lean in on friends, lean in on family, lean in on the people that you have around you that can be trusted. Life is very lonely when you do it alone. And you need people, you need community, you need friends, you need people that you can rely on. And so as much as we sometimes feel like we can carry the burden of life alone, it's important that we not only rely on God, but we have good people that are around us to also help us along the way. And ultimately, similar to what Dr. Lomax said, prioritize your mental health. Mental health does matter. It does exist. And we have to do better amongst ourselves to just keep ourselves accountable to make sure that we're healthy physically and mentally.
Thanks. Dr. Lomax, you had something else to add?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just going to slide this right in there because I didn't throw this in, but I want to really, really put this in here because I want women especially to hear this. If you are in one of those marriages, I never tell people to leave their marriage. I never, ever do that. But if you do have to get out and you make that decision to get out, I want you to know God does not hate you. Okay. That particular scripture just has been misinterpreted. God does not hate you. He hates the situation. He hates that you have to go through what you have to go through. And hate, it means prefer not to, not hate in our English sense of the word, but prefer not to. And once you are out of those types of relationships, it's because sometimes it's not a marriage, it's a relationship. You have to, as Madam Vanessa said, you have to get the correct type of care. I couldn't go to just any counselor. I had to seek out a divorce trauma specialist to help me deal with what I was coming out of. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's very important. I mean, specialized care is the difference between equity and equality. And that's where I think we have to balance the scale on that. Equality is, of course, making sure everyone has the care, but then the equity is making sure it's competent for each person, language, culture, tradition, well paid, well assessed, well accessed. And this is huge in our communities, especially communities of color. And we dealt with today the African and the African American because we are but a generation from it. So many of us that have come from the continent over here to the United States, we're first geners. So we are born African American, but our parents are African, and that thing where we have that connection or we have that bridge is the huge bridge that we're dealing with because the first geners, as I'm learning, are coming over here with the they're here. Well, I should say they're not coming here. They're here and they grew up with the access and the availability and the inclusion of that mental health. But the parents are like, no, that's not for us. That's not things that we do. That's not things that we say. Even in our tradition, you don't have to say culture. In Islam, we have women that are not going to do that because men are telling the women, if you go and get treated, then anything that comes out of you is going to be ill as well. So a woman that has a child and they're saying that they're needing some help. Oh, well, that's going to affect the child, so you can't do that. And then you can't breastfeed because if you're bipolar, it may get in the milk. And all of these negativities that are going through in the community, we are stepping in to change the mindset, because it is purely ignorance, pure ignorance. It has no justification, no boundary, no basis. And even in our faith, we have the right to divorce. I mean, it's given to us. We have probably more rights in Islam than men do, but they don't want to preach that. But the understanding is that we actually have the right to leave. We have the right, and there's no ill against us. We have a right to inheritance and childcare and child support and all of that, because it is our right. But when we leave, it is a stigma again that it's a dysfunctional marriage, or it's dysfunctional, or something wrong with us because we couldn't stay married. And that is a huge component. And I see the messages coming in through Fordham University, especially because they deal with the domestic violence piece. But in the interest of time, we have to send them over to the chat and have them included in the program. But I want to thank each and every one of you. Dr. Burks, thank you so very much for coming aboard and listening to us all day today. Thank you for being here. She's the newest member of FIRE, the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. Madam Amina Musa, Madam Corinthia, Sir Adrian, thank you. Madam, is that Madam Tracy? I want to believe it's Madam Tracy. I don't want to mess the pronouns up, so bear with me.
Apostle.
Apostle. Oh, that's Apostle Tracy. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Adrian is pastor. Adrian is pastor.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your attendance. And for the 49 students that listen to you today, thank you so very much, from NYU, Columbia, and Fordham University. Thank you so very much for being on board today. Thank you for being part. This is session 1. We have session 2 next week, Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel. And we're going to be bringing in session 2. And that session, oddly enough, and I really appreciate this next session, because it tickles me nothing, to say the least, because we're going to be dealing with caste, class, and culture. And we're dealing with the minority health in India. So we may have disparities here, but we're going to listen to how they come in to caste, class, and culture, and how the three of them are so totally different, but they're very, very unique in not accessing the mental health that is needed in their community. So join us next week, July 13th at 10 a.m., same link. So we will see you there. But thank you so very much, Madam Adebayo, for being here. Thank you, Bishop Lomax, for being here. We have digital gifts that'll be coming to you today. Thank you again for your time with us, and thank you for raising your voice for mental health. We will talk with you soon. Be well.